Hi guys, and welcome to this tutorial. Today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to do the satin stitch, and I'm going to show you guys in a couple of different examples. So the satin stitch is quite simple, and it's a very nice stitch for filling general areas, and if you have like a big places to fill, this would be a great stitch to consider using. So let me show you some examples of where I use the satin stitch. This is our pink pony kit, and for this kit I used the satin stitch basically anywhere that I wanted to fill in the area. So for example, you can see here it being used on these little flower petals, on the stems of these leaves, or sorry, the leaves, not the stems. I also used it on this horseshoe, and it was used to fill the shape. As you can see, it does have a different stitch over top of it to give it more texture, but for the general fill of the shape I did use the satin stitch. Let's see, I also used it up here for the little candy cane pole. So all of these red lines are done with the satin stitch, as well as this heart shape here and this little funky hand symbol was filled in with the satin stitch as well. So as you can see, it's very nice for filling in areas. It's perfect for that. It gives you a really nice, smooth, sort of even finish. So the first thing we want to do with the back stitch is just come in from the bottom. So I'm going to start at this corner of our square shape. And we're just going to go right across, back down to the opposite side. Once again, filling in that entire shape. And then we're going to repeat that movement by going right next to where we started, coming out from the top, entering next to our last stitch at the bottom, and pulling it through. And that's basically the repeating motion. Honestly, you're just going to continue to do that all the way across to fill in your shape. And a little hack before I just pull this all the way down, if you want to make sure that it's extra, your stitch is extra smooth and straight, you can just take the bottom of your, the back side of your needle and smooth it out like that to just make sure they're nice and straight, because of course your thread can get a little bit twisted as you're working. But we're just gonna repeat that all the way across. So it is a fairly simple stitch, but again, it's great for filling in areas with color. And you just want to try and make sure that you stay on that line of your design in order to get really clean lines and shapes. I wish my ink here on my fabric wasn't so thick. I was trying something new today, so on a transferring method for fabric, and I honestly don't like how it came out. It's very thick, but I didn't want to make this go to waste, so I'm going to use it anyway and hope for the best. Okay, I've gone ahead and finished this little square section. Okay, now we're going to move on to a shape that is not so straightforward. So something like this little arc here, this rainbow shape. We would of course start the same way, so you're just going to pick one end to start in and come in from the corner here. I'm going to try to go outside of my lines just to sort of try and cover that ink. And then come right back out across. Same thing, you're going to come up right next to that original stitch. And then come out next to your last stitch. Okay, and then in a shape like this, you are going to start to want to curve to get the contour of that shape. So my tip, or honestly what I do, is I sort of start to mark the areas where my thread should start to angle. So right here would be that first sort of corner. I could do the middle as well to give us an idea of that as well. And then the other side. So I do this every time that I have shapes like this. It is very useful, honestly, because as you're stitching, you kind of just get lost, or you just get in the zone, and then you forget to consider where you should start to turn and angle your stitches. So that just helps me out, and then I just come right back and continue where I was working before. But again, now I have that guide, so once I get to it, or really as I'm approaching that guide, I'm already starting to angle my stitches a little bit. That way we can get that nice curve. And as you can see, I am skipping some just to continue, again, really just to guide myself. And what I love about embroidery, but also the satin stitch, is that it's very forgiving, so I can still just come back and fill that area that I missed, and it's no big deal. Okay, so I went ahead and finished the little arc slash rainbow shape. Actually also a C. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to approach a completely round shape like a circle. And for circle, circle shapes. Ow. So for any round shape like this, I like to start from the middle. So similarly to how I did my guides on our little arc, I do the same thing for the circle, except just the center. And this doesn't have to be perfect, but it's just more so that you have a guide as to where to start. So I actually like to start from that line, going to either side of my shape. So I'm going to come to the right of it. And do the same thing we've been doing, which is following our outline and filling in the shape. Now, as long as you follow the outline, you should get a nice circle shape, of course, but the general understanding is that, of course, as you go down the circle, each of these lines is going to get shorter and shorter coming into the end here. Continue working, so just come right across to the other side and continue my stitches. Alright, so we're finished with our circle, so I'm going to just tie it off the same way as I've been doing. Okay, so now we're going to work on this sort of petal. And for this one, I like to approach it similarly to our circle, which is to make a guide, or rather start in the middle and then continue on either side. Okay, and then one of my lights just died, so I hope the difference is not horrible. I'm so sorry. So again, we're just gonna follow that contour of the shape, doing these, I guess, diagonal lines in this case, and then we're gonna start to move up a little bit. Something that I'll do is that if I see that my outline is not very smooth or even, I will go back in and sort of align everything. So we're finished with our petal. We're going to move on to this other little funky shape, which also sort of resembles a flower petal. And one thing I wanted to mention is the direction of your stitches. It of course doesn't always have to be vertically like we've done in these stitches here. Like our square or our circle could have been horizontal. It would have not, have made a difference. Obviously, if I turn it this way, then it would be vertical. It just depends on what you're going for. And then there's other shapes like our little arc that wouldn't really make sense had I tried to stitch them a different direction, or it would have just been a little bit maybe awkward. Same thing with this one here, just because of our very sharp sort of taper here, where the thread allows us to just do it in one nice little swoop instead of trying to create a tiny little stitch if I were to be going in this sort of, I guess, vertical direction. So just consider that whenever you're starting a project. For this petal, same thing. I could of course do it in this sort of horizontal way, but once we get to these little sharp ends is where it'll be a little bit difficult to get those stitches very tight and to look clean. So it would just make more sense for me to continue going in this vertical direction. So just something to keep in mind. But for the stitch, I'm going to start again from the center to give myself my guide. And I could continue to make guides for myself, or I could just honestly continue straight across like I did with our circle, which is what I'm going to do. So that is the final little shape. I also just realized this kind of looks like a cat, which is super cute. So that is it for the satin stitch tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope it was easy to follow along. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to leave those down below, but I'll see you guys on the next video.